In the twilight of my past life, Grace Harper stood as a shadow of the woman I once dreamed of becoming. For 30 years, I poured my soul into the Wilson family, bound by a vow I thought was love in Millfield, Ohio's small, weathered town. It was 2009, and I was 52, my hands rough from decades of toil, my heart heavy with loneliness. I had been a young woman with ambitions of becoming a doctor. But in 1979, when my husband James Wilson was declared dead in a factory explosion, my world collapsed. I stayed behind caring for his parents, Margaret and Robert, in their modest clapboard house, its paint peeling like the remnants of my dreams. The 1970s had been a brutal decade in America. Stagflation choked the economy, factories shuttered, and rural towns like Millfield withered. I, the daughter of a once prosperous Columbus family, had been sent to this forgotten corner during the economic downturn, my parents' wealth eroded by market crashes. James, a Vietnam War veteran with a quiet strength, had been my anchor, or so I thought. I married him at 22, desperate to escape the drudgery of rural life. He had shielded me from the town's bullies, his broad shoulders and steady gaze promising safety. But after his supposed death, I became the Wilson family's servant, cooking, cleaning, and nursing Robert, who was paralyzed from a stroke. Margaret's sharp tongue cut deeper daily, blaming me for James's fate. "You pushed him to take that factory job, Grace. You killed my boy." She'd hiss, her eyes gleaming with malice. I believed her, drowning in guilt, and surrendered my acceptance to Ohio State University's medical school to stay. For 3 decades, I scrubbed floors, prepared meals, and changed Robert's bedpans, my youth fading into the creaking walls of their home. My only solace was the faint hope that my sacrifices honored James's memory. But in 2009, the truth shattered me. James walked through the door alive, his face barely aged, accompanied by his childhood sweetheart Emily Parker and their teenage grandson Liam. They had come to claim James's place in the Wilson family lineage, to be honored in the town's cemetery records. My knees buckled as I stared at the man I had mourned for 30 years. Radiant in a tailored red coat, her hair sleek and modern, Emily stood beside him, a stark contrast to my gray, brittle strands and sunken frame. Liam, a bright-eyed boy, called James Grandpa with pride. The room spun as Margaret embraced them, her face alight with joy, as if my decades of service meant nothing. James barely glanced at me, his voice casual. "Grace, you've done well by Mom and Dad. Thank you." His words were a knife twisting in my heart. I stumbled to the back room, my chest tight with rage. The Wilsons had played me for a fool. James hadn't died in that explosion. He had abandoned me, leaving me to be enslaved by his parents while he built a life with Emily. Every sacrifice, every tear had been part of their cruel charade. I found their old oak chest always locked and pried it open with a crowbar. Inside were dozens of letters between James, Emily, and Margaret mocking my devotion. "Grace is so gullible," one reads. "She'll keep the house running while we live free." My hands trembled as I read each word, a betrayal deeper than the last. They had known James was alive, orchestrating my misery to secure their comfort. I sank to the floor, my vision blurring with tears and fury. A gust of wind knocked over an oil lamp on the table as I sat there. Flames licked the curtains, spreading with a hunger that matched my own. The Wilson house, the cage that had trapped me, was consumed in a blaze. I didn't move, letting the heat envelop me, my final act of defiance against a family that had stolen my life. As the fire roared, I whispered, "Let it all burn." My story, though, isn't just one of loss, it's one of redemption. If this tale of betrayal grips you, hit that like button, comment with your thoughts, and subscribe to our channel for more stories of triumph over deceit. Join me, Grace Harper, as I unravel the truth and take back what's mine. The memories of those flames lingered as I faced the end, my body frail but my spirit unbroken. I had given everything to the Wilsons, my youth, my dreams, my soul, only to learn I was a pawn in their game. James's return wasn't a miracle. It was a mockery. Emily's poised elegance, Liam's innocent smile, and Margaret's feigned gratitude exposed the depth of their deception. I had been 22 when I married James, a girl with a medical school scholarship who believed in love. By 52, I was a husk, my hands scarred from labor, my heart scarred from betrayal. The letters in that chest revealed years of correspondence, each a reminder that they had laughed at my suffering while I toiled. The fire was my release, a cleansing inferno that mirrored my rage, but it wasn't the end. Heaven, or perhaps fate, had other plans for me that would rewrite my story and theirs. When my eyes opened, I was no longer in the burning wreckage of the Wilson house. I was 22 again, standing in the cramped kitchen of their Millfield home, the summer sun streaming through a dusty window. It was July 10th, 1979, when I received James's death certificate and my acceptance letter to Ohio State University's medical school. My hands no longer wrinkled, clutched the envelope, its crisp edges, promising a future I had lost in my past life. A warmth pulsed in my chest, and a fleeting vision flashed before me, an ethereal figure cloaked in light whispering, "Undo their wrongs." I understood instantly I had been reborn, granted a second chance to rewrite my fate. The memories of my past life flooded back, every lie, every tear, every moment of betrayal etched into my soul. It was 1979, a time when America was reeling from economic hardship. The Vietnam War had left scars on the nation, and Millfield, a rural Ohio town, was hit hard by factory closures and soaring inflation. My family, once prominent in Columbus, had lost their wealth in the stock market crash of '73, forcing me to relocate to Millfield for work as a community nurse. There I met James Wilson, a discharged soldier with a quiet charm and a story of a chronic illness from his service. He protected me from the town's rougher edges, standing up to local troublemakers who mocked my city girl ways. Grateful and desperate to escape my circumstances, I married him within months, blind to the trap he and his family had set. Now reborn, I saw it all clearly. The Wilsons had targeted me from the start. James's father, Robert, had suffered a stroke in 1977, leaving him bedridden. I was the town's best caregiver, my nursing skills honed in high school and trusted by the community. James, with his supposed illness, had courted me deliberately, knowing I'd care for his parents. His childhood sweetheart, Emily Parker, was part of the plan, waiting to take my place in a brighter future. The college entrance exams, reinstated after years of economic restrictions, had given me a shot at medical school, a shot the Wilsons and the town mayor, Thomas Reed, planned to steal for Emily. I stood in the kitchen, the death certificate on the table, its ink stark against the paper. In my past life, I had crumpled under the news, believing James had died in a factory explosion in Cincinnati. I had let Margaret's accusations, "You killed him," Grace, chain me to their home, giving up my dreams for their sake. But this time my mind was sharp, my heart steeled. I remembered the letters from the chest that revealed James's survival, his marriage to Emily, and their contempt for me. I recalled how Margaret and Robert had known James was alive, using his death to trap me in guilt, while he built a life with Emily in the city. My fingers tightened around the acceptance letter hidden under my apron. This time I wouldn't be their pawn. The door creaked open, and Margaret stormed in her face, a mask of grief and calculation. "Grace, my boy's gone," she wailed, clutching the death certificate. Thomas Reed followed his mayor's badge, glinting his eyes cold. "He said we heard about your medical school letter," his voice dripping with false sympathy. "But with James dead, leaving Margaret and Robert alone would be heartless. Think of their suffering." Margaret's eyes narrowed. "You owe us, Grace. You stay here and care for us. That school's not for you." Their words were a script, one I had fallen for before. In my past life, I had nodded, tears streaming, and handed over my future. Now I saw the greed in Thomas's gaze, the malice in Margaret's. They wanted my university spot for Emily to secure her a prestigious degree while I rotted in Millfield. I forced a trembling lip, playing the part of the grieving widow. I need time," I stammered, clutching the decoy envelope. I had prepared a blank sheet in an old envelope. Margaret's eyes gleamed, sensing victory. "Please give it to Thomas," she urged. "Let Emily have it. It's what James would have wanted." I nodded slowly, then turned to the fireplace where a small fire crackled. With a dramatic sob, I tossed the decoy into the flames, watching it curl and blacken. Margaret gasped, her plan unraveling. "No! What have you done?" she shrieked. Thomas's face paled, his scheme to secure Emily's future in ashes. I ran from the house, tears fake, my real acceptance letter safe against my chest. As I fled, I heard Margaret's voice echo, "What will we do now?" I didn't look back. The bus to Columbus was waiting, and with it my chance to escape. The Wilsons thought they had broken me, but they didn't know I was reborn, armed with the truth. James wasn't dead, not yet. His illness was a lie, his marriage to me a sham. Emily was his legal wife, registered the day before our ceremony. They had played me for a fool, but I would turn their game against them this time. My new life began on a dusty road out of Millfield, with the promise of justice burning brighter than any fire. The summer sun hung low over Millfield, Ohio, casting long shadows across the Wilson family's sagging porch. It was July 10th, 1979, and I, Grace Harper, stood in their kitchen, my heart pounding with the weight of my reborn knowledge. The air smelled of stale coffee and regret, a fitting backdrop for the scene about to unfold. In my past life, I had been a naive 22-year-old, crushed by the news of my husband James Wilson's death in a Cincinnati factory explosion. I had let his mother, Margaret, and the town mayor, Thomas Reed, guilt me into surrendering my acceptance to Ohio State University's medical school, chaining myself to their household for 30 years. But now, armed with memories of their betrayal, I saw through their lies. The death certificate on the table, its ink fresh and accusing, was the first move in their carefully orchestrated game. Margaret burst through the door, her gray hair wild, her eyes red but gleaming with calculation. "Grace, my James is gone," she wailed, clutching the certificate as if it were her lifeline. "That factory job you pushed him to take, it killed him. You cursed us." Her voice cracked, but I noticed the slight curl of her lips, a predator savoring her trap. Thomas Reed followed his mayor's badge pinned to his chest like a medal of deceit. His face was somber, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of greed. "We're all devastated, Grace," he said, his voice smooth as oil. "I heard about your medical school letter this morning, quite an achievement. But with James gone, leaving Margaret and Robert alone, well, it'd be heartless, wouldn't it?" He paused, letting the guilt sink in just as he had in my past life. I clutched the decoy envelope in my apron pocket, my real acceptance letter hidden safely beneath my blouse. In 1979, America was a nation bruised by economic turmoil. The Vietnam War had left veterans like James struggling to find purpose, and Millfield's factories had shuttered one by one, leaving families like mine, once prosperous in Columbus, to scrape by in rural exile. I had come here as a community nurse, my skills a beacon in a town desperate for care. With his quiet charm and tales of a war-induced illness, James had won my trust, shielding me from local thugs. I married him to escape, not knowing he and his family had marked me as their pawn. His father, Robert, paralyzed since a 1977 stroke, needed constant care, and I was their perfect solution, a skilled caregiver with a dream they could steal. Margaret's wails grew louder, a performance honed by years of manipulation. "You owe us, Grace. You sent my boy to his death. Now you stay here, look after Robert and me. Forget that fancy school. It's not for the likes of you." Her words were a whip meant to break me. In my past life, I had crumbled, handing over my future to their demands. But now I saw the script for what it was. Thomas stepped closer, his voice low and conspiratorial. "My daughter Emily Parker could use that university spot. She's got potential, Grace, and with James gone, it's only fair. You'd be helping the whole town." His eyes gleamed, betraying his true motive, securing a prestigious future for Emily, James's childhood sweetheart and faithful wife. I remembered the letters from my past life hidden in the Wilsons' oak chest, mocking my devotion, while James and Emily built a life in Cincinnati. They had planned this from the start. James would fake his death, I would care for his parents, and Emily would take my place at Ohio State, becoming a doctor while I rotted in Millfield. My blood simmered, but I kept my face soft, my eyes wet with feigned grief. I didn't know what to do, so I stammered, playing the part they had expected. Margaret's face softened, sensing victory. "Give the letter to Thomas," she urged. "It's what James would want." Thomas nodded, his hand outstretched, eager to seal the deal. I pulled the decoy envelope from my pocket, my hands trembling for effect. "If it's for the best," I whispered, turning to the fireplace where a small fire crackled. With a sob, I tossed the envelope into the flames, watching it curl and blacken. Margaret gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. "No, Grace, what have you done?" she shrieked, her voice raw with panic. Thomas's face was drained of color, and his plan to hand my future to Emily was reduced to ash. I let out a choked cry, my performance flawless, and bolted from the house, my footsteps echoing on the wooden porch. Behind me, Margaret's voice rang out. "Thomas, what now? It's ruined." I didn't look back. My real letter was pressed against my heart, a ticket to freedom. The weight of their deception fueled me as I ran through Millfield's dusty streets. In my past life, I had missed their cunning glances, their rehearsed grief. I had believed James was dead, that I owed the Wilsons my life. But now I saw the truth. James had never boarded that factory job. He had married Emily legally the day before our sham ceremony, leaving me to be an enslaved person for his parents while they chased their dreams. The 1970s had broken many, but I would not be one of them. The bus to Columbus awaited a chance to unravel their lies and reclaim my destiny. My rebirth was no accident. It was a call to justice, and I would answer it. The county clerk's office in Athens, Ohio, was a squat brick building, its air thick with the scent of old paper and bureaucracy. I stood at the counter, my hands steady, despite the storm in my chest, clutching James Wilson's death certificate. It was still July 10th, 1979 hours after I had burned the decoy envelope in the Wilsons' fireplace, leaving Margaret and Thomas Reed stunned. My real acceptance letter to Ohio State University's medical school was tucked safely under my blouse, a secret weapon in my reborn mission. In my past life, I had never come here too broken by grief to question the Wilsons' narrative. But now, with 30 years of betrayal etched in my memory, I was here to sever the chains they had forged. The clerk, a middle-aged woman with tired eyes, glanced at the certificate. "You're dissolving a marriage," she asked, her voice clipped. I nodded, my throat tight. "James Wilson and he's gone and I need to move on." She typed his name into her ledger, then frowned, flipping through pages. "Grace Harper, you said?" I nodded again, my pulse quickening. She looked up, her expression softening with sympathy. "There's no record of you marrying James Wilson. He registered a marriage on July 9th, 1979, to Emily Parker, right here in Athens County. You're not listed anywhere." Her words hit like a thunderbolt, confirming what I had suspected, but hadn't dared believe. I leaned against the counter, steadying myself. "You're sure James Wilson from Millfield, son of Robert and Margaret?" The clerk double-checked, her fingers tracing the records. "Yes, ma'am. James Wilson and Emily Parker were married the day before your supposed wedding, no mention of you. The truth was a blade sharp and cold. James had never been mine. The ceremony we held and the vows I spoke were a lie, a performance to trap me. He had married Emily, his childhood sweetheart, legally, while I was duped into caring for his paralyzed father and venomous mother." My past life's memories flashed the locked chest, the letters mocking my devotion, James's casual dismissal when he returned with Emily in 2009. It all made sense now. I thanked the clerk, my voice calm despite the fire in my veins. Outside, the summer heat pressed against me, but I felt alive, unburdened. The Wilsons had played me for a fool, but their game was over. I boarded a bus to Columbus, the death certificate and my acceptance letter my only possessions. As the countryside rolled by, I pieced together their scheme. In 1977, after the Vietnam War left James jobless and his father paralyzed, the Wilsons needed a caregiver. I was their mark, a skilled nurse desperate to escape Millfield's poverty. With his fabricated illness, James had courted me deliberately, his kindness a lure. Emily, his true love, was complicit, waiting to take my university spot when I passed the 1978 college entrance exams, a rare opportunity in a nation recovering from economic collapse. In my past life, I had believed James died in that factory explosion, encouraged by me to chase a better life in Cincinnati. I had given him my savings, my trust, only to be blamed by Margaret and Robert for his death. Their accusations, "You killed our boy," had broken me, leading me to surrender my medical school dreams to Emily. For 30 years, I slaved for them, cutting ties with my parents in Columbus, who begged me to return. But now I saw the truth. James had never gone to Cincinnati. He and Emily had registered their marriage, then fled to start anew, leaving me to bear the burden of his parents' care. The factory explosion was a convenient lie, a cover for their escape. As the bus neared Columbus, I felt a surge of resolve. My rebirth wasn't just a second chance, but a mandate to destroy the Wilsons' plans. By burning the decoy envelope, I had thwarted their scheme to give Emily my university spot. But I needed more. I had noticed Emily lurking near the Wilson house that morning, her eyes sharp with envy. Knowing she'd overhear, I had spoken loudly about their betrayal, planting seeds of doubt about her place in their plan. In Columbus, I would reconnect with my parents, heal the wounds of my past life's estrangement, and begin my medical studies. But I wouldn't stop there. The Wilsons and Thomas Reed would face the consequences of their deceit, and I would be the one to deliver them. The bus pulled into the Columbus station, and I stepped off my acceptance letter, a beacon of hope. My parents' house wasn't far, and I could already imagine their arms around me, their relief at my return. In my past life, I had pushed them away, consumed by guilt. Now I would rebuild that bond, drawing strength from their love. The 1970s had tested us all, but I was no longer the naive girl who fell for James's lies. I was Grace Harper reborn, and I would reclaim my future piece by piece until the Wilsons' empire of lies crumbled to dust. The Columbus bus station smelled of diesel and stale cigarettes, a gritty welcome to my new life. It was late afternoon on July 10th, 1979, and I, Grace Harper, stepped off the bus, my heart pounding with relief and resolve. The weight of the Wilson family's deception still clung to me, but my rebirth had given me clarity. Hours earlier, I had stood in the Athens County Clerk's office, learning the shattering truth. James Wilson, the man I thought was my husband, had married Emily Parker legally on July 9th, 1979, the day before our sham wedding. My acceptance letter to Ohio State University's medical school, tucked safely under my blouse, was my lifeline. In my past life, I had slaved for the Wilsons for 30 years, believing James was dead in a factory explosion. Now I was free, and the dusty streets of Millfield, Ohio, were behind me. As the bus rolled through the Ohio countryside, I replayed the morning's events. In the Wilsons' kitchen, Margaret James's mother and Thomas Reed, the town mayor, had tried to guilt me into staying, demanding I surrender my medical school spot for Emily James's faithful wife. Their words, "You killed James. You owe us," had echoed my past life, but I saw their cunning this time. I had burned a decoy envelope in their fireplace, letting them think I destroyed my acceptance letter, their plan to secure Emily's future crumbling in the flames. Margaret's scream, "What now?" Thomas still rang in my ears as I fled their house. The clerk's revelation confirmed my suspicions. James had never been mine. He and Emily had orchestrated a lie, leaving me to care for his paralyzed father, Robert, and venomous mother while they built a life elsewhere. The 1970s had been a harsh teacher. America was reeling from stagflation, with gas lines and factory closures strangling towns like Millfield. My family, once wealthy in Columbus, had lost everything in the '73 market crash, sending me to rural Ohio as a community nurse. As a Vietnam veteran, James seemed like salvation, his quiet strength shielding me from the town's bullies. I married him to escape blind to his scheme. His supposed illness, a lingering effect of his service, was a fabrication to keep me at arm's length while he stayed loyal to Emily. My nursing skills honed in high school made me the perfect mark to care for Robert, who had suffered a stroke in 1977. The Wilsons and Thomas had planned it all. James would fake his death, Emily would take my university spot, and I would be their lifelong servant. I walked through the station, the hum of voices and clatter of suitcases grounding me. Columbus was a world away from Millfield's despair, its skyline promising opportunity. My parents' house was a short walk, and I clutched my acceptance letter, its words a beacon. "Dear Ms. Harper, we are pleased to offer you admission." In my past life, I had cut ties with my parents, consumed by guilt over James's death. They had begged me to return, but I stayed with the Wilsons, believing I owed them. Now I knew better. The clerk's words, "You're not listed anywhere," freed me from a marriage that never existed. James and Emily had registered their union secretly, and their wedding certificate was a legal bond I could never claim. My ceremony was a farce, a performance to trap me. As I neared my parents' street, memories of my past life surged. I saw myself at 52, gray and broken, discovering letters in the Wilsons' locked chest, mocking my devotion. James had written to Margaret that Grace would keep the house running. Let her believe I'm dead. The betrayal had killed me then, my rage, sparking the fire that consumed their home. Now I was 22, my hands smooth, my future intact. I knocked on my parents' door, my heart racing. My mother Ellen opened it, her eyes widening. "Grace," she whispered, pulling me into her arms. My father William joined us, his voice thick. "You're home." Tears fell as I told them everything: James's lie, the fake marriage, my escape. Their relief was palpable, their love a balm for my past life's wounds. "We'll protect you," my father said, his grip firm. "The Wilsons won't touch you again." My mother nodded, brushing my hair back. "You're our daughter, Grace. You belong here." Their words healed the estrangement I had caused in my past life when I rejected their pleas to leave Millfield. We sat in their modest living room, the 1970s economy evident in the worn furniture, but their warmth was richer than any wealth. I showed them the acceptance letter, and my father smiled. "You're going to be a doctor. We'll make sure of it." That night, I slept in my childhood bed, the weight of the Wilsons' lies lifting. But my work wasn't done. I had planted a seed in Millfield, speaking loudly of their betrayal where Emily could hear. Her envy would be my weapon, and the Wilsons' downfall was only beginning. The morning of Columbus was crisp, with the July air carrying the scent of cut grass and possibility. It was July 11th, 1979, my second day reborn, and I, Grace Harper, sat at my parents' kitchen table, the Ohio State University acceptance letter before me. My escape from Millfield had been a triumph, but the Wilsons' betrayal burned in my mind. In my past life, I had slaved for them for 30 years, believing James Wilson died in a 1979 factory explosion. Yesterday at the county clerk's office, I learned the truth. James had married Emily Parker, legally, leaving me in a sham marriage to care for his parents, Margaret and Robert. Sparked by a divine vision, my rebirth was a chance to unravel their scheme and reclaim my life. As my mother poured coffee, I pieced together the Wilsons' plan, my memories sharp as glass. In 1977, America was a nation of scars. The Vietnam War had left veterans like James adrift, and Millfield's economy was crumbling under stagflation. Factories closed, leaving families to scrape by. My own family, once prominent in Columbus, had been ruined by the '73 market crash, sending me to Millfield as a community nurse. There I met James, a discharged soldier with a story of a chronic illness from his service. He protected me from local troublemakers, his kindness winning my trust. I married him in 1979, desperate to escape, unaware he was part of a calculated plot. James's father, Robert, had suffered a stroke in 1977, leaving him paralyzed and bedridden. The Wilsons needed a caregiver, and I, with my nursing skills, was their target. James's illness was a lie, a way to keep me at a distance while he stayed loyal to Emily, his childhood sweetheart. Their plan crystallized when I passed the 1978 college entrance exams, a rare opportunity in a nation recovering from economic turmoil. The exams, reinstated after years of restricted access, were my ticket to medical school. However, the Wilsons and Thomas Reed, the town mayor, saw a chance to secure Emily's future. James would fake his death, Emily would take my university spot, and I would be trapped caring for Robert and Margaret. I sipped my coffee, and my parents' voices were a soft hum in the background. My father, William, was planning to contact a lawyer to ensure the Wilsons couldn't pursue me. My mother, Ellen, was arranging for my enrollment at Ohio State, and her pride was evident. In my past life, I had pushed them away, consumed by guilt over James's death. I had believed Margaret's accusations, letting her and Robert control me. Now I saw their motives clearly. James wasn't the mastermind his parents were. Margaret, with her sharp tongue, and Robert, even bedridden, had orchestrated the scheme. James, loyal to Emily and his family, went along. His kindness to me was calculated. Emily, too, was complicit, her ambition to become a doctor outweighing any guilt over my fate. I recalled Emily's perspective, pieced from my past life's memories. She had grown up with James, and their love was a quiet constant in Millfield. When Robert's stroke left the Wilsons desperate, Emily agreed to the plan, believing it secured her future. She didn't know the full extent of my suffering. Margaret kept her in the dark, feeding her lies about my willingness to stay. But Emily's envy was absolute. Her eyes were sharp with resentment when she saw me in Millfield. I had used that envy yesterday, speaking loudly of the Wilsons' betrayal near their house, knowing she was listening. My words, "James married Emily, not me," were meant to spark doubt, to turn her against the family that used us both. In my past life, the Wilsons' plan had succeeded. I gave James my savings in 1979, encouraging him to start a business in Cincinnati. Days later, news of the factory explosion came, and I believed he was dead. Margaret and Robert blamed me their insults. "You killed our bloodline, breaking me." I surrendered my university spot to Emily, who graduated from Ohio State and became a respected doctor. I stayed in Millfield, nursing Robert until his death. Then Margaret, my life, a cycle of labor and loneliness. When James returned in 2009 with Emily and their grandson, their happiness mocked my sacrifice. The letters in their chest revealed their contempt, their knowledge that James was alive, and their dissolution of our marriage to free him legally. Now in Columbus, I was free. My parents' support was a lifeline, their modest home a sanctuary. The 1970s had tested us, but their love endured. I told them my plan to study medicine and ensure the Wilsons faced justice. I had already sown discord by provoking Emily, and I would spread word through Clara Bennett, a friend from Millfield, that I was thriving at Ohio State. Emily's ambition would curdle into rage, and the Wilsons' house of lies would collapse. The Columbus skyline symbolized my reclaimed future as I walked to the university to confirm my enrollment. The Wilsons thought they had won, but I was reborn, and their reckoning was coming. The Columbus sunrise painted the sky in hues of gold, a stark contrast to the darkness of my past life. It was July 12, 1979, and I, Grace Harper, sat in my parents' modest kitchen, my acceptance letter to Ohio State University's medical school, resting on the table like a talisman. My rebirth had given me a second chance, but the memories of my previous life, 30 years of servitude to the Wilson family in Millfield, Ohio, burned in my mind. In that life, I had believed my husband, James Wilson, died in a 1979 factory explosion, a lie crafted to trap me as a caregiver for his paralyzed father, Robert, and venomous mother, Margaret. The truth uncovered in my reborn visit to the county clerk was that James had married his childhood sweetheart, Emily Parker, the day before our sham wedding, leaving me an enslaved person while they built a life elsewhere. In my past life, the Wilsons' deception had broken me. The 1970s were a brutal era in America. Stagflation crippled small towns like Millfield, where factory closures left families desperate. My own family, once prosperous in Columbus, had been ruined by the 1973 market crash, forcing me to work as a community nurse in Millfield. I met James, a Vietnam veteran whose quiet strength and fabricated illness won my trust there. I married him to escape the town's poverty, unaware he was part of a scheme to secure a caregiver for his parents. When I passed the 1978 college entrance exams, a rare opportunity in a nation recovering from economic turmoil, the Wilsons saw their chance. James would fake his death, Emily would take my university spot, and I would be bound to their household. In early 1979, I had supported James's dream to start a business in Cincinnati, giving him my meager savings from nursing work. "Grace, this is my chance to turn our lives around," he had said, his eyes gleaming with ambition I mistook for love. I promised to care for his parents, believing I was helping him. Days later, news came of a factory explosion in Cincinnati, a catastrophic event blamed on faulty machinery, a common tragedy in the era's struggling industries. Margaret and Robert descended on me, their grief a weapon. "You pushed him to go, Grace," Margaret shrieked. "You killed our boy. His body's gone lost in the rubble." Their words crushed me, and I believed I was to blame. Overwhelmed by guilt, I handed my medical school acceptance letter to Thomas Reed, the town mayor, who passed it to Emily. She went to Ohio State while I stayed in Millfield, where my dreams were buried. For 3 decades, I toiled in the Wilson house, its peeling walls a prison. Robert, bedridden and silent, required constant care, bathing, feeding, and turning to prevent bed sores. Margaret's insults were relentless. "You ended our bloodline, Grace. You're nothing but a curse," I endured, believing I owed them for James's death. I cut ties with my parents, Ellen and William, who begged me to return to Columbus. "We'll help you, Grace," my mother had pleaded, but I refused, consumed by a promise to James to care for his family. The 1970s gave way to the 1980s and 1990s, and my youth faded into gray hair and aching joints. I was a ghost in Millfield, my life reduced to labor and loneliness, the town's economic decline mirroring my own. My parents' letters stopped coming by 1985, their hearts broken by my rejection. Margaret grew crueler, forcing me to kneel and swear never to leave to atone for James's death by serving them forever. I complied, my spirit shattered. Robert died in 1995, his body frail from years of my care, but Margaret's demands only grew. By 2009, I was 52, my body worn, my soul hollow. The Wilsons had taken everything, my dreams, family, and life. I had no one left, no hope of escape. The town whispered about my devotion, some pitying, others mocking. I clung to the belief that my sacrifices honored James, unaware of the truth waiting to destroy me. As I sat in my parents' kitchen, now sipping coffee, I felt their love anchoring me. My father was on the phone with a lawyer, ensuring the Wilsons couldn't pursue me. My mother was packing a suitcase for my move to Ohio State's dorms. In my past life, I had lost them to my guilt. Now I vowed to rebuild our bond, to let their support fuel my rise. But the memories of my suffering steeled my resolve. The Wilsons thought they had won, but my rebirth was a chance for justice. I had already thwarted their plan by burning a decoy envelope denying Emily my university spot. I had spoken loudly of their betrayal in Millfield, knowing Emily overheard. Her ambition would turn to rage, and the Wilsons' house of lies would crumble. The Columbus campus of Ohio State University buzzed with new students, their voices a hopeful hum against the summer heat. It was August 1979, and I, Grace Harper, stood at the edge of my new life, my medical school orientation days away. My rebirth had freed me from the Wilson family's grip, but the scars of my past life lingered. In that life, I had served them for 30 years, believing James Wilson died in a 1979 factory explosion. The truth uncovered at the county clerk's office was that James had married Emily Parker legally, leaving me in a sham marriage to care for his parents, Margaret and Robert. My escape to Columbus with my parents' support was a triumph, but the full scope of the Wilsons' deception demanded reckoning. In my past life, the truth came too late. By 2009, I was 52, a broken woman in Millfield, Ohio. The Wilson house was my prison, its creaking floors and dim rooms a testament to my sacrifice. I had cared for Robert until he died in 1995, then Margaret enduring her cruelty. My nursing skills kept them alive, but their insults. You killed James. Your nothing killed my spirit. I had cut ties with my parents, believing I owed the Wilsons my life. The 1970s economic crisis had faded, but Millfield remained a ghost town, its factories rusted relics. I was a relic too. My gray hair and frail frame were a mockery of the doctor I could have been. Then in 2009, James walked through the door alive, his face barely aged. Beside him stood Emily, radiant in a red coat, and their teenage grandson Liam, a bright-eyed boy calling James Grandpa. Margaret embraced them, her joy a dagger in my heart. I stood frozen, my thin frame trembling as James greeted me casually. "Grace, you've done well by Mom and Dad." His words were a slap, his indifference a revelation. Poised and elegant, Emily barely glanced at me, but her words cut deep. I was never the other woman, Grace. I couldn't process her meaning, my mind reeling from 30 years of lies. The Wilsons had known James was alive, using his death to trap me in guilt. I confronted James, my voice breaking. "You were alive all this time. Why didn't you write?" I waited, James. I suffered. He sighed, his eyes avoiding mine. "Grace, we owe you, but nothing was real between us. I didn't board that factory job. I married Emily legally by the book. Mom dissolved our marriage quietly to free me. You're free now, too. Stay here if you want Emily, and I won't drive you out." His words were shameless, a dismissal of my decades of pain. I pressed further, my voice sharp. "Your illness, James, what about that? You said you couldn't—" He hesitated, then admitted Emily helped me through it. Let's leave it at that. It was a lie, another layer of their deceit. Rage drove me to their locked oak chest, a forbidden relic in the house. I pried it open, finding letters and photos, proof of their betrayal. James and Emily were smiling in Cincinnati. Their life was vibrant while mine withered. Letters from Margaret to James read, "Grace is our servant. Keep her there." They had corresponded for years, Margaret collecting letters through Thomas Reed to hide their secret. James had visited Millfield, secretly checking on his parents, satisfied with my labor, then leaving with Emily to build their business. Emily's letters revealed her ambition and ignorance of my full suffering. She believed I stayed willingly a fool in love. The truth was a fire in my chest. Margaret and Robert knew James was alive, so they dissolved our marriage to free him for Emily. They used my guilt to keep me enslaved, caring for them while James and Emily thrived. I collapsed, the letters slipping from my hands. A gust knocked over an oil lamp and flames spread, consuming the Wilson house. I didn't move, letting the fire mirror my fury. As it roared, I whispered, "Burn it all." My death was my release, but my rebirth brought me back to 1979, a chance to rewrite their story. Now in Columbus, I stood ready. My parents had enrolled me at Ohio State, and their love was healing the wounds of my past life's estrangement. I had planted seeds of discord in Millfield, speaking of the Wilsons' lies where Emily could hear. Her envy, sparked by my escape, would turn to rage. Through Clara Bennett, a Millfield friend, I would spread word that I was thriving, ensuring Emily felt the sting of her lost dream. The Wilsons' scheme had failed. Emily wouldn't attend Ohio State, and Robert's care would falter without me. The 1970s had broken many, but I was reborn, and the Wilsons would face the ashes of their lies. The autumn breeze swept through the Ohio State University campus in Columbus, carrying the scent of fallen leaves and new beginnings. It was September 1979, and I, Grace Harper, stood at the threshold of my reborn life, a first-year medical student. My escape from Millfield, Ohio, had been a triumph fueled by the revelation that James Wilson, the man I thought was my husband, had married Emily Parker, legally leaving me in a sham marriage to care for his parents, Margaret and Robert. My acceptance letter to Ohio State's medical school, once nearly stolen for Emily, was now my lifeline. In my past life, I had slaved for the Wilsons for 30 years, believing James died in a 1979 factory explosion. Now armed with the truth, I was ready to dismantle their world. My strategy began in Millfield the day I burned a decoy envelope in the Wilsons' fireplace, thwarting their plan to give Emily my university spot. I had noticed Emily lurking near their house, her eyes sharp with envy. Knowing she was listening, I spoke loudly of their betrayal. James's secret marriage, Margaret's lies planting seeds of doubt in her mind. Ambitious and complicit in the Wilsons' scheme, Emily believed she would become a doctor while I rotted in Millfield. My words were a spark meant to ignite her resentment. Now in Columbus, I would fan those flames. I had reconnected with Clara Bennett, a friend from Millfield who had also escaped to Ohio State. Clara, kind and perceptive, was my ally. Over coffee in the campus cafeteria, I shared my story, careful to emphasize my thriving life. Clara. I'm free now, I said, my voice carrying. The Wilsons lied. James was never mine. I'm studying medicine while they're stuck in Millfield's misery. Clara's eyes widened, her fork pausing midair. Grace, that isn't very good. Emily always acted superior, as if she deserved your spot. I nodded, feigning sadness. She can't have it now. I'm where I belong. I knew Clara's gossip-loving mother-in-law in Millfield would spread the news Grace Harper was succeeding, while Emily was left with nothing. The 1970s had crushed small towns like Millfield, where factory closures and stagflation left dreams scarce. Emily's ambition to escape through my university spot was her lifeline, and I had severed it. My words carried through. Clara would reach Emily, stoking her rage against the Wilsons, who had promised her a future but delivered betrayal. My parents, Ellen and William, were my anchor in Columbus. Their modest home, strained by the era's economic woes, was filled with warmth. In my past life, I had cut them off, consumed by guilt over James's death. Now we were rebuilding our bond. Over dinner, my father shared his plans to consult a lawyer, ensuring the Wilsons couldn't harass me. My mother, her eyes soft, packed lunches for my campus days, her pride in my medical studies evident. You're our girl, she said, hugging me. Their support healed the wounds of my past life's estrangement, giving me the strength to pursue justice. From the letters in the Wilsons' locked chest, I learned that James and Emily had built a life in Cincinnati, while Margaret kept me enslaved with lies. James loyal to his parents, and Emily had gone along with their scheme, his fake illness a tool to manipulate me. Emily, though complicit, was unaware of the full extent of my suffering, believing I stayed willingly. Without me in Millfield, the Wilsons' world was unraveling. Robert, paralyzed and dependent, relied on Margaret, who loathed caregiving. In my past life, I had nursed him meticulously, preventing bed sores and infections. Now I imagined Margaret's neglect, skipped feedings, unwashed linens. Clara had mentioned rumors of Robert's worsening condition and his room reeking of neglect. Margaret, selfish and lazy, would let him waste away. James, whose business ventures in Cincinnati were faltering in the tough economy, would return to a crumbling household. Emily, denied her university dreams, would feel the sting of my success. My strategy was simple: amplify their discontent. I wrote to Clara asking her to visit Millfield and casually mention my achievements, top grades, a scholarship, knowing it would reach Emily through the town's gossip network. The 1970s were a time of broken dreams, but I was rewriting mine. My classes at Ohio State were rigorous, and the lecture halls were filled with ambitious students. I threw myself into my studies, determined to become the doctor I was meant to be. Yet my mind was never far from Millfield. I pictured Emily's ambition curdling into anger, confronting the Wilsons for their lies. Torn between his parents and Emily, James would falter under pressure. Margaret, desperate to maintain control, would cling to her fading power. My escape had set their downfall in motion, and my words through Clara would ensure it. As I walked the campus, my stethoscope a promise of my future, I felt a surge of resolve. The Wilsons had underestimated me, but their reckoning was near, and I would be its architect. The Ohio State University campus was alive with the hum of autumn students rushing between classes under a canopy of crimson leaves. It was October 1979, and I, Grace Harper, was a month into my medical studies, my reborn life starkly contrasting to the 30 years of servitude I endured in my past life. In that life, I had believed James Wilson died in a 1979 factory explosion, slaving for his parents, Margaret and Robert, in Millfield, Ohio, while he lived with his faithful wife, Emily Parker. My escape to Columbus, armed with the truth of their deception, had set the stage for their downfall. I had burned a decoy envelope to thwart their plan to give Emily my university spot, and I had sown discord by speaking of their betrayal where Emily could hear. Now my strategy was bearing fruit, and the Wilsons' world was about to collapse. I was studying in the library when Clara Bennett rushed in, her face pale. "Grace, you won't believe what's happening in Millfield," she whispered, pulling me to a quiet corner. She had visited her mother-in-law, spreading news of my success as planned. The gossip had reached Emily, who was unraveling. Without me, Robert had died months earlier, his body ravaged by bedsores and neglect under Margaret's care. The town whispered of her cruelty, her refusal to feed or clean him properly. James's Cincinnati business, which had failed in the 1970s economic slump and had returned to Millfield, broken and broke. Margaret, now wheelchair-bound from a fall, relied on him, her demands relentless. Emily denied her university dreams and was consumed by rage, believing the Wilsons had betrayed her too. Clara's words confirmed that my plan was working. "Emily's been asking about you, Grace. She heard you're thriving here and it's driving her mad." I nodded, my face calm but my mind racing. Emily had become a doctor in my past life. Her elegance mocked my suffering when she returned with James in 2009. Now she was trapped in Millfield's despair, her ambition crushed. I had used Clara to amplify this contrast, ensuring Emily felt the sting of my success. The 1970s economy, with its soaring inflation and job scarcity, had left James and Emily vulnerable, their dreams crumbling without my sacrifice to prop them up. My words in Millfield, "James married Emily, not me," had sparked her doubt, and Clara's gossip was the fuel. Days later, the Wilsons found me on campus. James Haggard pushed Margaret's wheelchair, her eyes sunken but sharp. They looked like ghosts of their former selves, the weight of their failing scheme evident. "Grace, we need you," James pleaded, his voice desperate. "I'm alive, I swear, I missed you." His words were a pathetic echo of my past life when he dismissed my suffering. Her hands trembled, and Margaret added that Emily was a monster. "Grace." She pushed me, broke my legs. "Come back and James will marry you properly. We'll be a family in Columbus." Their audacity sickened me. They still saw me as a pawn, a caregiver to save them from their mess. I stepped back, my voice cold. "James, you know whose name is on your marriage certificate. Emily's your wife, not me. You lied for years and want me back as your maid." Panic flashed in James's eyes as he realized I knew the truth. Margaret sobbed. "I thought you'd gone mad. Grace died somewhere. Emily helped find James. We owed her. But she's venomous. Come back, please." Her tears were a performance as false as her past life's grief. I shook my head, ready to walk away, when a figure emerged from the shadows. Emily, her face twisted with fury, a knife gleaming in her hand. "Andrew, you coward!" she screamed, her voice shattering the campus's quiet. "You and your family lied to me. You promised me a future and a degree, then gave it to her." She pointed the knife at me, then turned on James. "You let your mother ruin me." Before anyone could react, she lunged, stabbing James repeatedly, his body collapsing in a pool of blood. Margaret screamed, trying to wheel away, but Emily turned on her. "You pushed me, Margaret. You caused my miscarriage, my child gone at 8 months. You made me barren." Her words revealed a truth I hadn't known in my past life. Emily's child had lived, but now Margaret's cruelty had cost her everything. Emily stabbed Margaret, her strikes brutal until she lay still. I stood frozen, the campus security rushing in to restrain Emily. She thrashed, screaming at me. "Grace, you burned my letter. You stole my life." I met her gaze, my voice steady. "I burned a decoy, Emily. Your father and the Wilsons wanted you to have my spot, so I played them. You were part of their lie, but you're no victim." Her eyes widened, realization dawning, but security dragged her away, her screams echoing. Emily and James had thrived. In my past life, their happiness had been built on my pain. Their greed and betrayal had turned on them. Their bloodline ended in a moment of rage. The 1970s had broken many, but I had risen. Waiting at home, my parents would hear of this chaos. Their support was unwavering. Shaken but safe, Clara would spread the story, ensuring Millfield knew the Wilsons' fate. I had orchestrated their downfall, using Emily's ambition against them. As I walked back to my dorm, the weight of my past life lifted. The Wilsons were gone, their lies exposed, and I was free to build a future they could never touch. The Columbus skyline gleamed under the crisp November sky, a beacon of hope in a nation battered by economic strife. It was 1979, and I, Grace Harper, stood on the Ohio State University campus, my medical school journey underway. My rebirth had freed me from the Wilson family's deception, a 30-year nightmare in my past life, where I believed James Wilson died in a 1979 factory explosion, only to learn he had married Emily Parker, leaving me to be enslaved by his parents Margaret and Robert in Millfield, Ohio. My escape to Columbus, armed with the truth, and my acceptance letter to Ohio State's medical school had been a triumph. I had orchestrated the Wilsons' downfall by burning a decoy envelope to thwart their plan to give Emily my university spot, and sowing discord through calculated words that sparked Emily's rage. Now their world had collapsed in a violent reckoning. Weeks earlier, Emily had confronted James and Margaret on campus, her knife ending their lives in a frenzy of betrayal. She had revealed Margaret's cruelty, causing her miscarriage, rendering her infertile, exposing the Wilsons' lies that had ensnared us both. My strategy had worked. I had provoked Emily's envy by spreading news of my success through Clara Bennett, a Millfield friend, knowing it would drive her to turn on the Wilsons. The 1970s had been unforgiving, with stagflation and factory closures crushing dreams in towns like Millfield. James's failing business and Margaret's neglect of Robert, who died from bedsores months earlier, had left them vulnerable. Emily, denied her chance at Ohio State, had snapped, her ambition twisted into vengeance. I sat in my dorm, my textbooks spread before me, the weight of my past life fading. My parents, Ellen and William, had welcomed me home, their modest Columbus house, a sanctuary after years of estrangement in my past life. In that life, I had rejected them, consumed by guilt over James's death. Now we were rebuilding our bond. My father, a former accountant, hit hard by the 1973 market crash, had consulted a lawyer to protect me from any Wilson claims. My mother, a schoolteacher, packed my lunches with care, and her pride in my studies was a daily gift. Over dinner, they listened to my story, the clerk's revelation of James's marriage to Emily, my escape from Millfield, the campus tragedy. My father said, "You're safe now, Grace," his voice firm. "The Wilsons can't hurt you anymore." My mother hugged me, her eyes wet. "You're our doctor, our pride." Their love healed the wounds of my past life, where I had cut them off, believing I owed the Wilsons my loyalty. I had spent 30 years in Millfield nursing Robert's paralyzed body, enduring Margaret's insults. "You killed our boy," while James and Emily thrived in Cincinnati. The letters I found in 2009, hidden in their locked chest, had revealed their contempt, their knowledge of James's survival, and their dissolution of our sham marriage. My death in a fire had been my release, but my rebirth was my redemption. Now I was living the life they tried to steal. My grades were at the top of the class, and my professors praised my dedication. Clara's letters from Millfield brought news of the aftermath. Emily had been arrested, her confession to the police confirming my suspicions. The Wilsons had promised her a medical career, using me as their pawn. Her rage fueled by my success, and Margaret's betrayal had led to murder. Thomas Reed, the town mayor, who conspired to give Emily my university spot, faced his own reckoning. Clara wrote that evidence of his corruption, accepting bribes to manipulate records, had been sent to the county office. Stripped of his title, Thomas fled Millfield, only to be found days later drowned in the Ohio River, his body bloated and unrecognizable. The town whispered of his shame, his wife collapsing at the sight. Their downfall was the justice I had sought, a consequence of their greed. My strategy had been precise. In Millfield, I had spoken of the Wilsons' lies, where Emily could hear, knowing her ambition would curdle into anger. Through Clara, I ensured the town knew I was thriving, starkly contrasting Emily's despair. James, loyal but weak, had crumbled under his parents' schemes, and his love for Emily was no match for their manipulation. Emily, complicit but betrayed, had believed she would rise while I suffered. Her miscarriage caused by Margaret's cruelty was a truth I hadn't known in my past life, where her child had lived. Now her pain had fueled her vengeance, ending the Wilsons' bloodline. The 1970s economy, with its job scarcity and broken dreams, had amplified their desperation, making my plan all the more effective. As I walked to class, my stethoscope around my neck, I felt a lightness I hadn't known in my past life. My parents' support, academic success, and the Wilsons' destruction proved my rebirth's power. I earned a scholarship for an international exchange program in 1984, allowing me to study advanced medicine abroad. The Wilsons' lies had crumbled, and I was rising, my future bright in a nation struggling to rebuild. Millfield was a distant memory, its ghosts no longer haunting me. I was Grace Harper, reborn, and my life was my own. The Columbus General Hospital stood tall against the spring sky, its white walls symbolizing healing and hope. It was 1987, and I, Grace Harper, was 28, the youngest department head in the hospital's history. My journey from Millfield, Ohio to this moment had been forged through my rebirth, a second chance granted in 1979, to undo the Wilson family's betrayal. In my past life, I had slaved for them for 30 years, believing James Wilson died in a factory explosion, only to learn he had married Emily Parker, leaving me to care for his parents, Margaret and Robert. My escape to Columbus, my medical studies at Ohio State, and my strategic dismantling of their scheme had led to their downfall, Emily's murderous rage, James and Margaret's deaths, and Thomas Reed's disgrace. My international exchange program in 1984 took me to London, where I mastered cutting-edge surgical techniques. I returned to Columbus in 1986, recommended as an exceptional talent, and was appointed head of surgery. My office overlooked the city, a far cry from Millfield's dusty streets, where the 1970s economic crisis had crushed dreams. I had turned down offers to stay abroad, driven by a vow to serve my country. My parents, Ellen and William, stood by me, their pride evident at every milestone. In my past life, I had rejected them, consumed by guilt. Now our bond was unbreakable. They held me tightly at the airport in 1984, reluctant to let go. "Come back to us, Grace," my mother whispered. I promised to keep that vow, returning to make them proud. My work at Columbus General was relentless but fulfilling. I introduced advanced instruments, saving countless lives, and rigorously trained students, passing on every technique I had learned. The 1970s had tested America, but the 1980s brought renewal, and I was part of it. One spring day, I was called to assist on a rare case with the Lynn Group, a team of elite surgeons. I reunited with Clara Bennett, my Millfield friend, now an accomplished surgeon. We collaborated for 2 weeks, poring over charts, consulting with the patient's family, and finalizing a complex treatment plan. The surgery was a success, the patient's recovery swift, and our team breathed a sigh of relief. Clara sat beside me over lunch in the hospital cafeteria, her smile warm. "Grace, you're a legend. The director wants you to mentor me as deputy. You saved us time in that surgery." I laughed, tapping her forehead. "You held your own, Dr. Bennett. I'm proud." We talked shop, her eyes bright with the same hunger for knowledge I had felt abroad. She mentioned a medical symposium at Ohio State in May, and I invited her to attend my keynote. "It's a date," she said, hugging me tightly. Our friendship, forged in Millfield's hardships, was a gift, a reminder of the life I had reclaimed. Clara shared updates on Millfield. Emily's trial had ended swiftly. She was sentenced to death for murdering James and Margaret, her confession detailing the Wilsons' lies and her miscarriage. Thomas Reed's corruption, exposed by evidence I sent to the county, had led to his downfall and suicide. "The town calls it justice," Clara said, her voice low. "They say the Wilsons got what they deserved." I nodded, feeling closure. Emily had become a doctor in my past life, her elegance mocking my suffering. James, loyal but weak, had followed his parents' schemes. Their letters found in 2009 had revealed their contempt, their plan to use me as a caregiver while they thrived. Now their bloodline was severed, their lies exposed. My strategy had been my salvation. I had provoked Emily's rage in 1979, speaking of the Wilsons' betrayal, which she could hear, and used Clara to spread news of my success. Emily, complicit but betrayed, had lost everything: her child, her dreams, her future. The 1970s economy had amplified their desperation, making my plan potent. Clara's laughter was behind me as I walked out of the cafeteria, and I entered the sunlight. My parents were waiting at home, planning a dinner to celebrate my latest publication. I had kept my vow to them and myself to live with pride and serve purposefully. The Wilsons were a distant memory, their ashes scattered. I was Grace Harper, a doctor, a daughter, and a survivor. My legacy was triumphant.